tutorial, we are going to look at setting up something called parenting. Now, to try and explain to you what parenting is, this is going to be a very quick, simple demo. So you've got three objects here. These could be three enemies. These could be three collectibles. And what you can have is then what's called a parent object. Now, basically, the reason we would use parenting is this. You could put all of the code in one object here and then have that basically sent to the other object. So it saves you having to put the same object, the same code in object 1, 2, and 3. We can also, after inheriting the code from the parent object, we can, should we wish to, change the code slightly as well. So for example, if you wanted to have object 1 having a different speed to object 2 and 3, you can do that, no problem at all. So let's have a quick look. How do we go about this? Well, before I start with this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new instance layer in here. And I'm just going to call it enemy. And we're going to add in two enemies here. All right, so these two enemies are there. And what I am going to do is I'm going to make a new object. And I'm going to call this enemy control. Now, what I could potentially do is I could put all the code in enemy 1 and make that the controller, and then obviously just put that down into our enemy 2, and if I had a third one, fourth one, whatever, doesn't matter. So what we're going to do first of all is this. We're going to build this up in stages. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I am going to click on add event, and we're going to create, and we are going to add in a variable, and I'm just going to give this a speed. Now I'm going to call this enemy speed, and I'm going to give it a value of 3. Okay. Now we're also then going to add in what's called a step event. So this is something that runs every second of the game, and we're going to say X is going to be enemy speed. Okay, and we need to make this relative so that it moves across the screen. So essentially what's going to happen is these enemies now will move basically across the screen. And what we want to do is as soon as they hit the wall, we want to bounce and go the other way. Okay, so let's have a quick look. How do we do that? Well, we need to do a collision. So when we collide with the object or wall, then what we want to do is we want to say this. We want to say enemy speed, and then enemy speed multiplied by -1. And what this does is it takes a positive number and puts it into a negative number. And believe it or not, that's now the code that we need to get this enemy to move. So what we can do is we can apply this code to our enemies. So this object is called enemy control. If I click on parent here, you can see then I got a thing here that says children. So what I can do is if I select both of these and drag them in here, you can see now this is saying that enemy control has children, enemy 1 and enemy 2. Now if I go into these, enemy 1 and enemy 2, what you'll see is the events have been copied out, but they are grayed out. Okay, they are what's called read only. So what it's basically saying is that, look, this is pulled in from the other object. So if we play this now, okay, so you can see there now these objects are bouncing back and forth, and that's good. So with my little play, I can move it around. We still haven't set any collisions up. However, what I can do is now, if I go back up here and let's do a basic collision. So if I go add event, a collision with the object player, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, right, when we hit the player, we're going to jump to start. Now, bearing in mind, I've only put this code inside the enemy control. I haven't put it inside these, but obviously because these are parents, it will inherit the permissions. Sorry, not permissions, it'll inherit the code. So let's try this out. Let's see if it works. Let's go down, bang. Ooh, now then, you'll notice it's not doing something. Look what it's doing. It is basically setting this to be back to the start. Okay, and likewise, what happens now on this? So it's basically putting the enemy back to the start. So this is what we need to do. So when the O enemy control hits O player, what we do is this. We still use the jump to start, but there's a little drop down next to it which says apply to or applies to. So what I'm going to say is it applies to, I can either say the other object that it hits, or I can specify. So I'm going to specify because I've only got one player in this. So if I click on objects and then O player, so every time now we hit, this code will apply or should apply to O player. And as you can see, it just goes back each time. So let's try it now. We tried it with the green, let's try it with the yellow. Bang. Okay, so you can see that works. Now what happens if you did want to inherit most of the code, but you wanted to change something? Well, fortunately, that's quite easy. Let's go into the O enemy one, and you will see all of the code has been inherited. But let's say, for argument's sake, if you wanted the enemies to move in the same way, but you wanted one enemy to be faster than the other. Well, if I right click, then what we can do is we can either inherit or we can override the event. Okay, now if I click on open parent event, it goes back to O enemy control. So what I'm going to do is if I click in inherit, you can see it's just got core parent. So that's not exactly what I want to do with this, right? So what I want to do is I want to, if I just delete it, I might have to now put it back in again. No, it's come back. That's good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to override the event. Now what that does is by overriding, it removes what was ever there. And if I decide then to put in enemy speed, and let's say, for example, now I wanted it to be faster, let's say 6. You can see now we have 2 different speeds going. The code, the rest of the code is exactly the same, and because we've used the same variable name, you can see it works there beautifully. Now the last thing, just to show you, if you wanted to make things a little bit more random, what you could do is, if I just take this back a little bit, so if I just delete this event now, you can see the old one comes back, so that is very, very useful. If we go back to the O enemy control, and let's say for argument's sake now I wanted to make the speeds a bit more random, what we could do is you could use something called random underscore range, and then what we could do is we could have 2 or 3 different speeds. So let's say for example now we do 5,9. That then would allow us to have a speed between 5 or 9. Now let's just see what that actually does. Now it's going to be quite quick, that one is. Let's do a greater range. So we'll do it then 3 to 9. So I want to try and see if one goes on a lower one. Nah, they've both gone fairly quick there. But you can see they are working at slightly different speeds there. Let's try it once more to see if it'll generate a different random number. Yeah, they are slightly, I think they might be the same there. But what that means is each time the level will load, it'll generate a slightly different speed for them. But it looks to be they are exactly the same, so obviously the code is going to be exactly the same, so it'll generate it once. Now then, if you look at that, there's not too much and too many things that we've added in here. But the beauty of using this type of inheritance is if we then, let's say for example, we had another, let's call this enemy 3, and let's make it a different color. We'll go with the blue. So if we now add in another enemy, so our enemy 3, and we just bind the sprite to it. Now if I go into parent and then we select the parent object, as you can see the code for the others now comes straight in, and what that then allows us to do, I can go straight into my game and I can add then another enemy straight in. Now just because it was going a bit too fast, I'm going to change this out a little bit and put it back down to 3. Just so you can see they are there working, and that is the new one that we've just put in. So that is a very quick overview of how we could use parenting to set up a movement on your enemies. And you can have then different enemies working in slightly different ways, should you wish to.